Good evening, everybody. I'm getting my hair in order here so I don't look totally crazy, but I look a little crazy. Been on the road. So good to be back. Happy Wednesday. Yeah. So we're going to be getting into a little bit of a, what we call this, like an episode extra. The episode hasn't come out yet, but it's something I couldn't fit into the episode. So we're going to talk about that regarding the Dade Massacre. We're going to touch a little bit on the Dempsey Willard fight, kind of the last vestiges of the old west in a boxing match, all kind of summed up in a boxing match, which drew 100,000 people, 100 something thousand people in 1919. So we're going to do a little bit of a preview of that and talk about our upcoming episode, and then we'll get out of here. But good to be back. What's up, Josh? I just saw the message that you left on Instagram. I am in fact alive. It's just been, if there was a time to fly back to Central Texas, yesterday was not it. So let's see what else we're going to get into. That's it for tonight, but this should be a good show. Got some interesting stuff. The Dade Massacre is not super. I'm trying to get in focus here. Is not super well known, and I kind of thought that's why it'd make a good episode. If we have any Floridians in the chat tonight, and I'm getting anything wrong regarding location, let me know. But we are going to examine an aftermath account taken from one of the surviving soldiers. All told, there's 3 surviving soldiers from the Dade Massacre. Really, only 2 make it. One of them succumbs to his wounds later. But this account that we're going to examine tonight is primarily taken from Private Clark. I forget his first name off the top of my head, but it's very interesting. It has a lot of stuff that I just wasn't able to cram into the episode. So I thought this would make a great live stream. What's up, Coach Holtz? I was hoping you'd be here, man. Good to see you. Good to see you. Jake Skywalker, what's up, man? We got all the regulars in here. Space Cowboy, good to see you. This channel should be required viewing. If I have my way, soon it will be. Soon it will be, my friend. This is one I think you guys will like. This episode, the Dade Massacre. I don't know how many of you out there have heard of it, but it's a huge event in Florida's history. It's really what kicked off the Second Seminole War, which is vastly different from the first Seminole. Vastly tougher to say too. Vastly different from the first Seminole War in terms of the machinations behind it, the geopolitical machinations, the actual intent of it. Much different, and it really is what made the Seminole Wars continue for ostensibly for decades. So very interesting and often overlooked aspect of American history. This account is pretty brutal, so it'll be a good one. I think everybody will like it. The more brutal, the better, it seems like, with this band of vagabonds we've assembled here. Lake County, Florida. What's up, Kelly Boston? Let me know if I'm getting anything wrong tonight. This should be it's from someone else's account, but it's interesting because a lot of the greenery, what's the word for it? The flora around the area changed. It actually happened in the middle of what's described as a pine barren, but now there are different trees there. So this account actually talks about how in just a few years since the massacre, and since the massacre and the writing of the account we're going to examine here, the trees have changed. And it makes a particular note to say, don't think that I'm lying here. I know the trees have changed. It used to be a pine barren. Now it's a little bit different. So it gives that caveat too. Mike Holtz with a $10 super chat. Thank you, sir. Space Cowboy MB, what are your thoughts on the NASA scientists and UFO guys unaliving and disappearing? We need an episode on that. It's such a rabbit hole. Yeah, I mean, I have my vehement doubts about NASA's validity in a lot of ways, but it is getting very curious that we're seeing so many scientists pass away. I've just kind of got wind of this maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And yeah, we can do an episode on it. I heard about it. And then last night 3 or 4 days ago in California, I really hit me that like, oh, wow, I think a couple more passed away, or unalived, whatever. So I thought, well, okay, maybe this is worth looking into. I need to get a haircut, guys. It's getting serious again. All right. Let's see. Am I forgetting anything else? The Battle of Lake Okeechobee. Yeah, we're gonna get to an episode on that. This is kind of the prelim for the Battle of Lake Okeechobee. There's some brutal battles. Really, the intent of the article we're going to look at is to explain why it's called the Dade Massacre and not the Dade Battle. It's sometimes called the Dade Battle, but in general, it's called the Dade Massacre. And we're going to examine the sociopolitical and racial dynamics within the Seminole, just within the bounds of this article. He uses some rather objectionable wording that I'll probably be changing a little bit, but it's a really good account. It's obviously taken from one of the few survivors, which what's really interesting or really heartening is that the survivors' accounts, mesh up almost perfectly. So we can take what we're given here at face value, more or less, as history goes. So, yeah, it's a great account. Like I said, it's just got so many little details I wasn't able to fit into the episode. I think it'll be definitely worth examining. And then this episode should be out hopefully in the next 3 or 4 days. Hopefully. Do an episode about the Battle of Lake Okeechobee. It's coming. It's coming. It was pretty much a one-sided fight, too. This was a one-sided fight. What I often forget, or what I guess I kind of unintentionally overlook in the writing of this and had to kind of keep going back and trying to emphasize in the script, is that these guys argued for weeks. These guys who were on the expedition between, let me kind of preface it with an explanation of what happened. So this contingent of soldiers led by Lieutenant Dade are sent from Fort Brooke to nearby Fort King. But in the middle of Fort Brooke and Fort King, it's all Seminole territory, and it's after the first Seminole War, but tensions have been steadily rising in the area. A number of treaties have been broken. A number of raids have been made by the Seminole, and every soldier at Fort Brooke, including Dade, argues that this is a self-deletion mission, that this is a bad idea. The officer who issued it actually issued a retraction or a change of the order that got to Fort Brooke too late. And Dade and his men had already taken off. So they knew that they were walking into almost certain death, and it adds an even creepier layer to the story. Every shadow that they saw, every sound that they heard, they thought, oh, that might be a Seminole. This might be it. And when they finally got out of the palmetto groves, and in general, they got out of the thickest parts of the swamps and the palmetto groves, and they got to a little bit more of a piney area, and even came out of the thickest part of that, they thought, okay, we're pretty much on the home stretch. We think we've made it through. We can't believe it, but we made it. We're going to make it to Fort King. And that's exactly when the Seminoles spring the ambush. They had planned this to a T. This actually takes place simultaneously with another ambush that was basically about a personal vendetta between a Seminole chief named Osceola and the head Indian Affairs agent of the territory named Wiley Thompson. So instead of joining the Seminole at the Dade Massacre, Osceola had said, like, look, I'll be there, but give me a couple hours. I got to take care of some personal business. Osceola had been basically held prisoner at Fort King, took great offense, long story short, at how he was treated by Thompson. And so he took some of his boys. They go to Fort King and they unalive Thompson. Basically, they unalive Thompson and then bail. They unalive him, they scalp him, and then they take off. And they're like, okay, hopefully we can make it in time for the Dade Massacre. They do not, but the rest of the chiefs, Alligator, Oteyamathla, and Micanopy, have this massacre, have this ambush planned to a T, and they shoot Dade first. They make a point of shooting the officers first and causing absolute chaos within the ranks of the Army soldiers. They are a little taken aback at the power of the 6-pound cannon, which means that it fires 6-pound cannonballs. But they still manage to get over that, and they just catch everyone off guard. It is a carnal house of horrors, charnel, whatever. It is a ugly scene. It's terrifying. It adds a little bit of horror to me that it's in the middle of Florida. It just, the swampy element, I think, just gives it another layer. And it's really kind of like a southeastern version of Little Bighorn in some ways, and just in the totality of the massacre. We're going to talk about the Seminoles' involvement with the massacre as opposed to their adopted, I guess we could say, cohorts in what amount to the escaped slaves or the descendants of escaped slaves that had been adopted into the Seminole tribe. If you want a really good kind of cursory examination of that, our episode on Pompey Factor and the Seminole Scouts fighting the Comanches south of the Texas-Mexico border on the Rio Grande was a great episode. It's probably 6 months or so ago now, but look up History at the OK Corral Seminole, and that should come up. Oh, Elite Super Gunner, $2 super chat. Thank you, sir. Oregon Trail game streaming. You know what? My friend Sam, who's supposed to come on here to do a talk about the Crusades and watch Kingdom of Heaven, would be able to set me up with that. We've been meaning to do some game streaming here. I just haven't gotten off my butt and done it. I'm looking for a pin right now. But let me write that down. Because for our generation, yeah, that's the ultimate. Oregon Trail game stream. Cool. Let's see. Make sure I'm not missing anything else. Hello to all the regulars. Happy Cappy. Good to see you. Blakely, what's up? Vishnu, what's up? Do an episode about the Battle of Wahoo Swamps. That is on the docket as well for all of the Seminole episodes coming your way. Wahoo Swamp, but I'm going to write that down just in case. Let's see. There are accounts of Iroquois folks up by the lakes wearing wooden armor. Yeah, I've read those. I find them credible. What's up, Amadiana? Good to see you. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to jump into reading this account here. This is written by, oops, I had it brought up. Oh, of course I can't find it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is an account taken from Private Clark, who is one of the 3 survivors, really one of the 2 survivors, because one of the survivors later passed away of his wounds. But this is Albert Hubbard Roberts' account, written in, I believe, ultimately published. When was this published? I'll have to look up the exact date, but this ended up being published in the Florida Historical Society Quarterly in January of 1927. So we're going to start from the beginning. I'm going to skip a couple parts. Actually, let me post the link to this in the chat for anyone who's interested in reading along. Great read. It's actually not very long. I'll post it. I'll pin it at the top of the chat here. And really, if you want to read this before the episode comes out, it is just terribly informative. It really is sets the stage for the episode really well. But you don't have to read it because I'm going to read it. But there'll be parts that I'm skipping because they're just a little bit more kind of, I don't know, a little extra. So we'll skip over those. But without further ado, one who would write again of the Dade Massacre, 91 years after its occurrence, must forego the expectation of discovering any great wealth of original data and content himself in the main with the assembling of facts already published and the elimination of more or less doubtful detail that has crept into former narratives in an effort to bring into stronger relief a more or less neglected story of an American soldier's courage and fidelity unto death. So, I mean, like, they get very flowery with the writing here. But essentially what they're saying is, we're cutting out the BS. We're going to give you the real story. It's a very, like, Fox News-esque, whatever, CNN-esque breakdown, a headline, a teaser for the video ahead. We are bringing you the real story, cutting out the fluff. Stay tuned. So, every school child has been taught the story of the Alamo, a tragedy enacted scarce 2 months after the massacre of the Dade Command, and of the slaughter of Custer's cavalrymen 40 years later. But even Florida histories have not given full prominence to this disaster of territorial days. Histories of the United States scarcely mention it, and the story is not to be found in any encyclopedia. Yet, while the loss of life was less, because of the number engaged were fewer, the men who fought and fell on the Dade battlefield in the first daylight of annihilation of American soldiers by Indians are deserving as of high are as deserving of high honor in the hearts of their countrymen as the soldiers of Custer or those of Travis. Meaning, kind of to my point earlier, this is analogous in many ways to, yes, the Alamo, certainly, and to Little Bighorn, and really among the first of the total annihilation of American forces by Native forces. Continuing on, resistance on the part of the Seminole Indians and their prospective removal from Florida to a western reservation under the treaties of Payne's Landing and Fort Gibson, having made it evident that a show of military strength on the part of the federal government would be necessary to enforce as construed by the administration of Andrew Jackson, and that military forces in the peninsula of Florida during the 1835 being limited to 7 companies with perhaps 250 men in all available for service, that 6 additional companies need be ordered to Fort Brooke on Tampa Bay. The 1st Detachment, Company B, 4th Infantry, 39 strong, under Brevet Major Francis L. Dade, arriving on the government transport Motto arriving on the government transport Motto from Key West, it's a tough one, on December 21st, 1835. So what happened was, what he's saying there in such flowery language is things got real bad. It was getting hot in Florida. The Treaty of Payne's Landing and the Treaty of Fort Gibson both essentially promised the Seminoles that they would be unbothered, that they could keep their lands, that they would be afforded government allotments. Surprise, surprise, much of that never happened. The Seminole get mad, tensions start ratcheting up, and they need to bring in reinforcements. And I've always, having read this story, I found it interesting, compelling, humanizing that, 10 days before this battle occurs, Major Dade is sitting in Key West. And like, yeah, he's at a fort. Yeah, it's in the 1830s. It's not what it is today, but he's enjoying Key West. It's not too bad. And he gets shipped up, all of a sudden shipped up. And then 10 days later, he's dead in the middle of the Florida swamps. It's a hell of a thing. Bam Indiana, a $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Thanks for the live. Thanks for coming by. We'll be doing more of these as I've been traveling. Things have been crazy. You guys know how it is. It's crazy out there. Thank you so much, though. Let's see. So, continuing on here. On December 23rd, a strong detachment consisting of parts. It's written so strange, guys. I feel like we could do better today. On December 23rd, a strong detachment consisting of parts of 4 companies under command of Major Dade and numbering 8 officers and 102 non-commissioned officers and men, including several musicians and artificers, began their march to Fort King, present-day Ocala, something more than 100 miles northward, with the superintendent of this is a tough one, with the superintendent of it's tough. Where the superintendent of this is a tough title. Where the superintendent of Indian Relations, General Wiley Thompson, had his headquarters, and whose small garrison was recognized to be insufficient even for defensive purposes. So Wiley Thompson is a bit wily, it seems like, in the confines of this story. The Seminole didn't seem to like him. A lot of the people that served with him were a little iffy of him. And to be fair, he is stuck in the middle of nowhere, knowing that he does not have enough men even to hunker down in the fort and fight off the Seminole. So this is the big problem that drives the officer at Fort Brooke to order Dade and his men to venture to Fort King. And this is what spells disaster for them. Continuing on here. It was not until the morning of it was not in this part isn't even hard to read. Okay. I'm just messing this part up. It was not until the morning of Monday, December 28th, 1835, when the expedition had traversed two-thirds of the distance to Fort King, that Dade relaxed his vigilance and, as results prove, at a fatal time. So they've gone through, almost 100 miles of swamp, palmetto, pine groves, and everywhere they look, they think that, the ambush is coming. He finally gets to a point where they think they can relax. And of course, that's when the ambush is sprung. Though he sent forward an advance guard as usual, he had no reason to apprehend a daylight attack from Indians in the open pine woods, and omitted the flankers, thereby exposing his column to an enfilade fire from the Indian foe secreted behind the pine trees and in the tall grass and clusters of palmetto to the left, to the west of him. And sorry, on the trail from Fort Brooke to Fort King, along which the detachment was advanced. This is a tough one. On the trail from Fort Brooke to Fort King, along which the detachment was advancing in double file. So essentially, it's two lines of men. For this entire time, the entire time that they've been marching, his general practice, as he's I believe a West Point grad, but in his training, he is trained to send out flankers and advanced scouts. Someone that we'll be talking about later is Pacheco, who is actually still under, he would still technically be a slave. His quote unquote master basically rented him out as a scout to this contingent of soldiers. They basically hired him out and paid his quote unquote master. But his name is Pacheco. He spoke several languages, was a master scout, and was integral in the column even getting this far. Now, there's some talk that maybe Pacheco was not real happy with being a slave and kind of cut a double deal with the Seminole, but there's no real proof of that. All that we have proof of is that he was an amazing scout. Also, flankers would be sent out to the west and to the east of Dade's contingent, usually with dogs. And a lot of the accounts talk about hearing the dog command saying, "Come back, go out, go this way." So you'll hear, like, as they're marching, especially in the morning, they hear like a lot of dog commands, and they wait for Pacheco to come back and tell them, "Okay, the dogs are out clearing the area." Think of them like DEA dogs, like they're seeing that there's anyone in the area. They're sniffing around. If the dogs don't see anything and Pacheco doesn't see anything, they move on a little bit farther, and then they stop again. And Pacheco and the dogs go out and they check everything. And it's just that for almost 100 miles. So it's a miserable process. But now, this morning, as they've come out of the pine groves, Dade has said, "Okay, we don't need to do that anymore. We're very close to Fort King. I think we should be good. Let's just put our efforts into getting there rather than sending out advanced forces and waiting. Let's make this one last stretch so we can actually get to Fort King." Major Dade, on horseback, followed the advanced guard. The morning being chilly, the men had their overcoats buttoned over the ammunition boxes and were entirely unprepared to meet the unheralded attack which burst upon them about 8 o'clock in the morning. The most detailed and authentic account of the battle is from Ransom Clark, a private of Company B, 2nd Artillery, who escaped from the breastworks about 9 o'clock in the evening of the massacre. He was the only survivor who witnessed the entire battle, though two others, John Thomas of Clark's company and Joseph Sprague, Company B, 3rd Artillery, escaped during the fighting and returned to Fort Brooke ahead of Clark, all of them horribly wounded. It's amazing that any of these guys survived. Absolutely. Let's see. Am I missing anything? The only kind of important detail here is that Dade is at the front of the line. As they're advancing double file, Dade is several yards in front with the advance guard. In his narrative of the battle and the subsequent massacre of the survivors, Clark states that he heard a rifle shot in the direction of the advance guard coming, a rifle shot towards where Dade is, followed by a musket shot from that quarter, and before he had time to think of their meaning, a volley was poured upon the column from the front and all along the left flank. half of the command went down at the first fire, and several other volleys had been fired before he could see any enemy. Then only their heads and arms from out of the long grass and from behind the tall pine trees. So they've been caught entirely off guard. They had just, as soon as they put their guard down, is at the most inopportune time. Um, and then when the first volleys start pouring in, literally the first volley takes out half of their guys. This is just utter destruction. Imagine the first scene of the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan, where the door is going down and like everyone in the PT boat is just getting mowed down. Exactly like that. You're just seeing everyone fall, except they don't know where the Seminole are. They only see. Imagine that you can think of this like a Vietnam era ambush. Like they have no idea really where the fire is coming from, and they can't see the enemy. And basically, none of these guys have any. No one has any experience in fighting like this. It renders most of their training useless. And as more and more officers start to fall, there is less and less leadership for these completely inexperienced troops, and it just becomes an abject disaster. Continuing on here, Major Dade and Captain Fraser were killed by the first volley, and Lieutenant Mudge was mortally wounded. So you can just see the officers just start boom, 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 falling, which is the intent of the Seminole. Lieutenant Henderson had one arm broken, while both of Lieutenant, sorry, while both Lieutenant Keel's, this is a tough one, while both of Lieutenant Keel's arms were broken. Only Captain Gardner, Lieutenant Basinger, and Dr. Gatlin were untouched. So as we move forward, especially in the episode, you'll see that Gardner, Basinger, and I'm not sure, is that like Kim Basinger? For my generation, that's a contentious topic. And Dr. Gatlin were untouched. Lieutenant Henderson, though wounded, managed to load and fire his gun repeatedly, cheering the men until he was shot down towards the close of the second attack. This is an important detail where they actually managed to get the guns, the 6-pound cannon, into position, largely under the leadership of Lieutenant Gardner, who was known at West Point as the God of War. Pretty dope. But he manages to get the cannon into position, the 6-pound cannon, meaning it fires 6-pound shot, I believe, about that big. The actual first volleys of the cannon don't work, basically because the cannonballs are too small. They can only hit what they're fired at right in front of them. So they switch to grape canisters, which are basically giant shotgun shells. They're stuffed with BBs about that big, and they fire like a shotgun out in a spray, in a funnel. That finally dissuades the Seminoles' first attack. So when he's talking about the second attack here, the Seminole actually kind of do a half-hearted retreat, go back behind the lines of the pine trees where they can't be seen anymore, and they kind of get their butts chewed by the chief alligator. Everyone there is thinking like, well, we killed enough soldiers, we did a pretty good job. Like, let's take a break for a second. Let's, go home. Maybe we'll come back later, but pretty good day's work. And alligator is just like, you guys are a bunch of pansies. What did we even come here for? You need to get back in there and finish the job, basically. And they all are kind of shamed by alligator and eventually make a second, third attack. There's several waves of the Seminole attack. And every attack seems to kill one of the officers. So this just devolves and keeps devolving for the soldiers as more and more officers fall. But Lieutenant, now I've lost his name. Lieutenant, can't believe it. Gardner, sorry. Lieutenant Gardner, the God of War, is able to kind of take command of the situation at least towards the middle and latter stages of the battle. Okay, so continuing on here. Let me see if I have anything left over that. Lieutenant Kays, with both of his arms bound and in a sling, so like a straitjacket situation, really, really not good, was too severely wounded to take any part in the ensuing battle. Unconscious or nearly so, He reclined against the breastworks constructed during the lull in the fight until he died. So during the lull between the first and second attacks, Gardner orders basically half of the men who are able bodied to start cutting down trees. They have to go take the axes off of their dead comrades and start cutting down trees. And they make this kind of like triangular, it's basically like three fences. There's big, like 8-inch gaps, but they stack the tree trunks on each other and make this triangle fort of sorts with the 6-pound cannon pointing towards where the Seminole have come from. But I mean, it basically stops nothing. It just kind of gives them a position to try and hold, but nobody really thinks they can hold it. Everyone knows they are in a really bad spot, and they're just watching more and more guys die. But when he's talking about the breastworks, and as we continue here, that's what he's referencing, is this ad hoc, loosely constructed pseudo fort that they are now going to fight for their lives in. And there's mud everywhere, there's blood everywhere, there's viscera everywhere, there's gun smoke, there's Seminole war cries. This is an absolute nightmare. I think of it kind of like the scene in Platoon where they have a night attack and all they can do is hunker down and fight, and it's just a terrifying situation, much like that, but the 1835 version of that. So continuing on here, the men threw themselves behind trees and opened a sharp fire of musketry, and Lieutenant Bassender fired 5 or 6 rounds from the 6-pounder, the cannon, which apparently did little damage, but frightened the Indians into withdrawing over a hill half a mile or so away from the battlefield, after they fired some 12 or 15 rounds. While some of the men went about the field gathering ammunition and assisting with the wounded, others began to fell large pine trees, from the logs of which they constructed the rude breastworks 3 logs deep, with the main wall on the west, the direction of which the attack had come, and the northern and southern walls converging towards the trail in a pond of a triangular form. So there's a small pond that doesn't seem to play a lot of it, but there's a big role in the battle. But there's a small pond off to the side of the trail, and the strongest part of these breastworks, think of it kind of stacked like that, is facing towards the west where the attack has come from. But the other 2 sides are basically like a couple 2x4s, like a little kid's fort. It's of virtually no use as far as like holding their position or providing any protection. They are in a really bad spot. Everyone knows that the only guy who's kind of keeping their spirits up or keeping any belief that they can survive alive is Lieutenant Gardner. And they think like, well, as long as this guy's alive, like maybe he can lead us out of this. Continuing on here. They had barely risen the fortifications knee high, which seems to be literal, like it's just a couple feet off the ground, when the enemy returned to the attack, spreading themselves from tree to surround the soldiers when within a long musket shot. So as soon they try to surround the soldiers and close this circle in tighter and tighter until they can get a shot, and then they unloose a volley, and then they retreat back a little bit farther. By 2:00 in the afternoon, after 5 hours of steady fighting, allowing 3/4 of an hour interval between the first and second attack, so about 45 minutes in between the first and second attack, all had been cut down. Captain Gardner, after being severely wounded towards the end of the battle, cried out, "I can give you no more orders, my lads. Do your best." This is in the episode a emotional peak or maybe valley in the episode where the men now believe there's really no escape. Once Gardner dies, so too does largely the morale of the men. Excuse me. Dr. Gatlin, kneeling behind the breastworks, Dr. Gatlin, kneeling behind the breastworks with 2 double-barreled guns beside him, took satisfaction in the fact that he had 4 barrels for the enemy, which he will be killed later, but he does have some awesome last words. As soon as he's being overtaken by the Seminole, he says, "I got 4 barrels for you." Bam, 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 bam. So it's a very like Quentin Tarantino-esque scene where he lets them get as close as he can, blast off his 4 barrels, which would create a veritable deluge of viscera and bodily gore, he lets them have it. It's a pretty badass scene in this story. Lieutenant Basinger, severely wounded. Basinger, sorry guys, I switch back and forth. Lieutenant Basinger, severely wounded, told Clark to lie down and pretend himself to be dead. With none left to resist, the Indians then charged into the woods and, either believing all to be dead or unwilling to crown their victory with a cold-blooded butchery, stepped about carefully, quietly removing the arms and accoutrements, meaning the guns and accoutrements, accoutrements, and without offering, let me start over. Quietly removing the arms and accoutrements without offering indignity, they retired in the direction from which they came, leaving the bodies of some 30 men lying side by side along the north and west walls of the breastworks, their arms extended in the direction they had fired their last shots. It is an absolute slaughter. This account is unaware of, I believe it's Alligator. There's 3 chiefs here: Alligator, Micanopy, and Oteamatla. I believe it's Oteamatla who issues the edict that the warriors are not to, it's specific that they are not to scalp the soldiers, they are not to loot them for valuables as far as jewelry, clothing, etc. They're simply to take the ammunition and leave, which is very odd, but the pragmatism behind this is that they have to get out of Dodge as soon as they can. They can't hang around and wait for more soldiers to come. They have to seize this opportunity, seize this victory. This is great PR for the rest of their, to keep this campaign going for the rest of the Seminole. And they don't want to mess this up by hanging around too long and taking a bunch of trophies. So their orders are to take the ammunition, take the weapons, leave. And so that's what the survivors see. And it is a little confusing to them. The slaughter of the wounded, which this is really the crux of this entire article and kind of why I wanted to share it with y'all. Because why do we call it the Dade Massacre? Even why am I calling it the Dade Massacre in the title? Really, this paragraph explains it, and it's also kind of a de facto and very brief examination of the geopolitical stance of the Seminole at the time, being they weren't anti-slavery. They held slaves themselves, but they were very open to the adoption of escaped slaves, though that still created this kind of micro contingent within the Seminole who seemed to be acting independently in this case, as far as the treatment of the surviving soldiers. So keep that in mind as we go over this next paragraph. The slaughter of the wounded, which justifies the appellation, quote, massacre, which means the slaughter of the wounded, which means the term massacre is appropriate more than battle. My voice is giving out. The slaughter of the wounded, which justifies the appellation massacre to what up to this time had been a legitimate ambuscade, skillfully planned and daringly executed, was committed not by the Seminoles, whose better nature was manifested in their hour of victory, but by 40 or 50, it uses a objectionable word here, so I'm going to say escaped slaves, who galloped up on horseback and with a vile derision began to dispatch the wounded with axes and knives. Lieutenant Basinger, hearing them butchering the wounded, at length sprang up and asked them to spare his life. They met him with blows of their axes and fiendish laughter, is Clark's statement. Clark himself, wounded in 5 places and with 2 bloody scratches on his head, which gave him the appearance of having been shot through the brain, owed his life to the stupidity of this is his words, to the stupidity of an escaped slave who caught him by the heels and then threw him down again, saying, "Damn him, he's dead enough." Joseph Wilson, a private of Gardner's company, crept from under the dead bodies after the escaped slaves left, apparently unhurt, and having asked Clark to return with him to Fort Brooke, they jumped over the breastwork, only to be shot down. Excuse me. He jumped over the breastwork. We're talking about Joseph Wilson, only to be shot down by an Indian who sprang up from behind a tree. So Wilson thought he was cool. Wilson was not cool. Clark then lay quietly until 9 o'clock that night, when he and Edward de Courcy, a private of Company B, 2nd Artillery, slipped from behind the breastworks and, having seen the enemy retreating northward, decided to attempt the long journey back to Fort Brooke rather than the shorter one over to Fort King. This is a big part. They have to decide whether they're going to go back to Fort Brooke. I haven't found exact mileage, but let's say it's 80-20. They have to go 80 miles back to Fort Brooke or 20 miles to Fort King, but they don't know what's ahead of them on the way to Fort King. They can assume that what they've been through so far is at least navigable territory. They know the direction they're heading, and they're thinking that there won't be, if they already came this way, there won't be any Seminole ambushes set up behind them. They don't know what's ahead of them. So they choose the longer trek back to Fort Brooke. Okay. This is an account again from Private Clark. My comrade and myself got along quite well until the next day, says Clark. And my voice is giving out. Says Clark, in continuing his narrative. When we met an Indian, let me just start that over. My comrade and myself got along quite well until the next day, says Clark, in concluding his narrative. When we met an Indian on horseback and with a rifle coming up the road. Our only chance was to separate. Classic, like 80s movie dilemma. Thus we did so. I took the right and he took the left on the side of the road. The Indian pursued him. Shortly afterwards, I heard a rifle shot, and a little after that, I heard another. I concealed myself among some scrub and some saw palmetto, and after a while I saw the Indian pass by, looking for me. Suddenly, however, he put spurs to his horse and went off at a gallop towards the road. I've heard different accounts that, well, I saw a different account that said that this warrior spotted him, but he says no, so we'll go with that. Quoting from Clark's account again. I made something of a circuit before I struck the beaten trail again, meaning he took a circuitous route to get back to the road so it would be tougher to follow him. That night, I was a good deal annoyed by the wolves, who had scented my blood and came very close to me. The next day, the 30th, I reached the fort. So the battle occurs on the 28th. They wander around, and de Courcy is killed on the 29th. And finally, on the third day, he makes his way back to Fort Brooke. Also, it's touched on later in the footnotes of this article, but there are contemporary accounts that would validate his account of wolves. There apparently were wolves in this area of Florida in 1835. They're obviously not there today, but contemporary accounts do validate that. And yes, a pack of wolves would likely follow a heavily bleeding man, because he's not like lightly wounded. Imagine him just like covered in gore, just covered in it. He looks like Carrie, right? Like this is gross. And whoever is on guard at Fort Brooke sees this guy coming, and it freaks him out quite a bit. Let's see. Am I missing anything else? Yes, we're going to talk about. So that's got kicked off, guys. My bad. Wi-Fi has been a little sketch since I got back, but we should be good. I just wanted to say, so we've seen Clark get back. The other two soldiers will get back a day after him. And he kind of sums that up in the article just briefly, like, okay, one of them died of their wounds. And then Clark and the other guy obviously survived. And then he jumps into talking about the rest of the army going back to the battlefield in February and what they found. And it's a very Teutoburg Forest moment for me. If you know the story of the Teutoburg Forest, where the Romans were ambushed in the middle of the Teutoburg Massacre, where the Romans were ambushed in the middle of the Teutoburg Forest by the Germanic forces. It was a super dark forest, comparably creepy moment, a comparably creepy outcome with virtually everyone being killed. And then accounts of later Roman legionnaires who came by and found the battlefield of the just state of horrors that it's in. It's skeletons still in their uniform, still in the position that they were killed in. Obviously, the smell is horrific, and they are not in a state of full decay. We're talking about 8 weeks or so after the battle, and we're talking towards the end of winter. It's a little bit more chilly than it normally would have been. So even in the swamp conditions, not fully decomposed, it's an ugly scene. And we're going to talk about the firsthand account of seeing that. So it is Saturday, February 20th, 1836, about 8 weeks after the battle. The Commander General P. These names are tough. That the Commander General Edmund P. Gaines, en route from Tampa Bay to Fort King, halted at the Dade battlefield, and the officers having each been identified by some article of clothing or valuables upon his person, in parentheses, the Indians had not robbed them of their personal property. Again, he mentions that because it is quite the anomaly. The officers were buried in a trench beyond the eastern end of the breastworks, and the soldiers in 2 trenches inside, with all of their military honors. The 6-pounder, recovered from the pond where it had been thrown by the Indians, being placed at the head of this mass grave, essentially. And also, this is an interesting account because Clark does recall that the 6-pounder was so reviled by the Seminole, they don't know how to operate it either. They figure, well, let's just destroy it. Honestly, very akin to wars that we've seen recently in, you name it, like Vietnam, Afghanistan, several places. So not a new phenomenon. Let's see. Continuing on here with the actual remains of the soldiers. There, the remains rested through the long war which followed, all the way through the Second and continuing on Seminole Wars. As it drew to a close, talking about the Seminole Wars, officers and men of the Army were invited to contribute each a day's pay for the purpose of removing the remains of the Dade command, together with the officers who were killed or died of wounds or disease in the service, and of a number of non-commissioned officers and privates who had met their death under circumstances of unusual gallantry for permanent burial in St. Augustine, Florida. This was accomplished on Monday, August 1842, 9 days before the cessation of 9 days before the cessation of hostilities had been declared, 6.5 years after they had begun. So the Second Seminole War is lengthy. The First Seminole War was pretty, not good, but pretty quick. The Second Seminole War goes on almost 7 years. He says 6.5. It's kind of closer to 7 by the way I would count it. Let's see. What else am I forgetting? Am I leaving anything out to color this episode? Let's see. Oh, let's talk about the Dade pyramids as well. With great solemnity, that's tough. There's a lot of, you know what I mean? Some of these words, we could use a different word. We don't have to use words that are so hard to pronounce, but with great solemnity and all the honors that the army and the citizens could render, the remains were brought into the city of St. Augustine in wagons, each covered by the American flag as a pall being draped over the coffin, and drawn by 5 elegant mules. Say the contemporaneous accounts. This is what the author is saying. By contemporaneous accounts, each of the coffins was covered by an American flag and drawn by 5 elegant mules. They were taken to, this is confusing. To the wail of music and the booming of guns, they were carried to the garden of St. Francis Barracks. They were carried to the garden of St. Francis Barracks, now the St. Augustine National Cemetery, and there they were interred within 3 vaults under, quote, the Dade Pyramids. Catholic, Protestant, and Anglican services were held over the graves, and with a Masonic address in the Presbyterian Church. That's a little iffy. I don't know. A list of the officers and men buried in the vaults was read to the assembled throng and deposited within the garrison for permanent keeping. I'd like to go see that today. Does anybody live around there? Can you tell me if the Dade pyramids are still there? But yes, at the time, this was seen as a huge deal, and this is the author's overall point. It was a horrific incident and often overlooked in place of the Alamo, which happened just a few months. It happened in 1836. 3.5 months after this, and kind of overtook the Dade Massacre in the national consciousness, which, like, understandably, it was a massive event that kicked off a massive war. And it was Texas as a republic at the time, not necessarily the United States. But we should not overlook the Dade Massacre. We should not focus on the Alamo to the expense of the Dade Massacre. This was a horrific event, an absolutely paradigm shifting event in terms of national politics and the U.S. military. It was just a turning point that is often forgot, and it is just unparalleled, maybe paralleled, but certainly matches any massacre in American history for its brutality, and really is one of the earliest iterations of these massacres. So it's just a tragedy that it's overlooked. Hopefully, we'll remedy that a bit with the upcoming episode, but a fascinating subject to look into yourselves. And I thought this would help kind of color the events that we're going to look at, because it covers so much in such a simple article. And some things, yeah, to keep in mind as you're watching the episode: the brilliant strategic planning of the Seminole, the abject horror that the soldiers were in for days as they marched between Fort Brooke and Fort King, the surroundings that they were in that would be as unfamiliar to them as it would be to you or I if we've never been to Central Florida. The repercussions of the battle, the brutality of the battle, the intra-tribal dynamics of the Seminole as far as their adoption of escaped slaves and their implementation of them within their own society, within military ranks, within other cultural venues or other cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Other cultural pursuits. How they were incorporated into their society. Anything else here? Just kind of, I think, the surprising nature of how the United States was caught off guard by a force that they wildly underestimated, and that it ended up culminating in this almost 7-year war. Now, look, I'm not alluding to anything that's happening right now, because I started this a while ago. But hey, it's worth a watch. It might be interesting, considering the state of our current events. Right? It's worth a watch. You can see that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it can rhyme. It can rhyme. So, yeah, that's kind of I thought a wonderfully illustrative article that would really help set the stage for the upcoming episode on the Dade Massacre. Now, keep in mind, we have lots of shorts coming. Oh, also keep in mind to hit the like button. Really helps us out to get the stream out there. But keep in mind, we have lots of shorts coming. Another side story compilations coming. We have the Dade Massacre episode. We have the Taking of John Giles episode. We have another Comanche and Ranger story. We have more on the Cherokee coming up, more on Bigfoot Wallace. Lots of stuff. We have lots of new stuff, lots of stuff that lots of the subjects that we've been known for, lots of new stuff. So I think this is going to be an exciting year. Okay, I'm going to check the chats now. Let's see here. Oh boy. Oh, did somebody say? Somebody said it sounds. Jake Skywalker, my boy. He said this sounds like the Teutoburg Forest. I think you referenced that before I did. So absolutely. Teutoburg Forest would have been hellacious if you were a Roman, says Josh McAllister. It's one of the creepiest stories in all of history. It would have been terrifying. Like, imagine the first scene of Gladiator, except they all lose. It's a scary story. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna keep. We got a lot of chats. Thank you guys. Elite Super Grunt says grape shot. Yeah, it's referred to as grape shot, canister shot. I think grape shot is kind of more the military. If you're familiar with it, you call it grape shot. I call it canister shot in the episode just to illustrate that it's a giant canister, but it's essentially a giant shotgun shell. They were getting shot at from above too. The warriors were high up in the trees, says Josh McAllister. I did not know that. So I've never heard of that before. I saw that used in the camp attack scene in The Revenant, and they have a couple warriors up in the trees there. I thought, like, I've never read that before, so I'm glad there's an account of it. An L-shaped ambush. Yes, the warriors would have been in an L shape along, I believe, that would be the northern and western sides of the trail. It was just they caught them perfectly. Like that Mike Tyson quote. I think he's watching Sugar Ray Leonard and he goes, boom, perfect timing. When I went to Disney World as a little kid, I half expected Seminoles to pop out from Magic Kingdom. I mean, that'd be cool. We got a lot of chats. Okay. I don't think the terrain allowed for any flankers, at least on both sides, ahead and behind, but not on both sides. Yeah, I think he sent. You're saying essentially, Josh McAllister is saying they're kind of boxed in on this trail, so there was like nowhere to send the flankers to. There essentially was just pines everywhere. So it's like, well, we don't have anywhere. You can't go out there. Like it just logistically doesn't allow for it. But he did send Pacheco out that morning, I believe, which causes some consternation in historical examinations for some people, because some people think that Pacheco survived, and people think that, I believe, he disappeared right before the battle. I have to dive into that. I only get like a week to research these stories, so I have to dive into Pacheco some more. But he lived to be 95 years old, and there was always a question of like, did he know this ambush was coming, and did he just not say anything? Which, I mean, like, he was not real happy with how he was being treated. He was a human being rented out. He wasn't real happy with that. Once upon a time, Zachary Taylor was a modern major general. I'm not sure what you mean by that. My grandparents used to visit Florida regularly, says Blakely. They told me stories of Seminole who never surrendered. Oh yeah, like the Japanese. So they still lived, like the Japanese group of soldiers who got down to be one soldier, but they didn't surrender. They were up in the mountains in the Philippines and didn't surrender till, I believe, 1974, something like that. Let's see. Vishnu says, note my comments. Battle of Lake Okeechobee. Shave your beard. Yeah, I'm working on it. I was traveling. I'm losing. Oh, you know what? If you put a comment in earlier, that's where I'm getting confused. If you put a comment in earlier and I got kicked off the stream, I lose those chats. So if you have something that you wanted me to see and I didn't see it, put it back in again, because I lost the first group of chats. Let's see. I bet the noise scared the S out of them. I believe it must have been horrifying. Cannon shot, the yells of wounded men, the Seminole war cries, the wounded Seminole. It would just be hell on earth. I have a grape shot in my cannonball collection. Oh, very cool. What's up, Amadiana? Regardless of how you pronounce her name, Kim Basinger was definitely worth a discussion. True. Highly overlooked in 8 Mile. Let's see. Why is it called the Dade Battle? Because of the commander, Dade. Major. I always mix his rank up. It is. I'm not great with name. Brevet Major Francis L. Dade. Let's see. Let's come up in the congressional. Sorry, I'm perusing the comments here. Like I said, if I missed your comment to begin with, put it back in, because I got a lot of the chats cut off. It was a 100-mile trip, if I recall right. Yeah, I've read it just says around 100 miles. Let's see. Why wouldn't you just go the 20 miles to Fort King? The way that I understand it was they were thinking, well, if we weren't ambushed on the way so far, we might as well go back that way, because we don't know if there's ambushes set ahead, more ambushes between where we are right now and Fort King, which is like, I mean, I might do the same thing. Let's see. Varys, where are my legions? Yes, absolutely. Who was the emperor that it drove him crazy? Because the Teutoburg Forest Massacre drove the emperor. Oh man, I'm not great with emperor names, but drove him crazy, where he would just walk around the Roman palace halls. Not great with Roman history. screaming at night, just like carrying on. Varys, give me back my legions. Varys, give me back my legions. Let's see. I think of it very much as like a kind of like a hillbilly thing. Like he's wandering around at night, like getting drunk and yelling about his ex-wife, like that. But he's a Roman emperor. Wolves, snakes, and gators were probably in Central Florida. Not fun. No, not fun at all. And I think people underestimate a very different flora and fauna landscape, even in the short, relatively short, what biological and geological time frame from 1835 to now. Very different, like different trees, a lot more trees in some cases. It certainly sounds like more trees at the location of the battle. And yes, there would be snakes, wolves, mountain lions, often referred to as panthers, usually referred to as panthers, gators, bears, all of that also to be contended with the Seminole. So a much different landscape than it is today. 7-year war against the Seminole. Yeah, basically 7 year. Like they said 7.5, 6.5 in this article. It's really kind of think closer to 7. Just curious. Forgive me if you've already mentioned it, but who wrote the narrative for this? Sure. I only mentioned it briefly at the beginning. It is Albert Hubbard Roberts. And I don't know if the link to the article also disappeared. So I'm going to pin the link to the article here. Highly recommend checking it out on your own. I only covered about half of what's here. All of the footnotes are fascinating as well. So it is pinned at the top of the comments there. Available free. Read it at your leisure. Let's see. Florida is Jurassic Park as far as I'm concerned. Yes, me too. Like that's exactly what I think of. Let's see. Oh, $2 super chat from Jake Skywalker. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing the story and the knowledge. Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. What a story. Oh, yeah, I think you guys will really enjoy this episode. It's intense and it just dives into it right from the get-go. I actually restarted the script. I started the script from the vantage point of Private Clark escaping the warrior on the horse, but actually then I moved that to later on in the script, and it opens with Dade being shot, basically. Like they're wandering through, they're just out of the Pine Barrens, and he's shot. So it jumps right into it. It's like a car alarm apocalypse out there. Let me know if that's bothering you guys. There's like 3 alarms off. I wonder if there's hopefully no one's trying to break into the Forerunner. Fetterman and earlier, the Grattan massacres. I haven't done the Grattan massacre yet, but I've done the Fetterman massacre about 2 years ago. I thought it was a really good episode. If you look up HOKC Fetterman massacre, it'll be there. It's, I think, I don't know. I like them all, but one that I really liked, I thought like, oh, that's a standout episode. The Seminole War would lead the Spanish in Florida. Oh, you're saying the Seminole War would, I'm not sure, but Mark, you're referencing a really important point here that the Spanish supported the Creek tribe, who was the primary rival for the Seminole, and the Spanish were playing, realpolitik as well in Florida before basically Jackson came down in the first Seminole War, and Jackson was ardently Spanish, ardently anti-Catholic. They tried to get the Spanish out of there. But until that point, the Spanish were the ruling European power in the territory and supported the Creek, which really garnered the ire of the Seminole and really hurt them as a tribe. Let's see. Is it your car? I don't think so. I live in an apartment complex, so there's a bunch of cars outside. It's coming from this side. I'm parked over there, but there was like 3 of them going off at once. Now I don't hear any. Can't hear the car alarms. Right on. It was intense. Yeah, wait for the episode, Hansel. What's up, Hansel? And I think the episode you guys are really like. I notice episodes that jump right into it do better. Sometimes I'm like trying to make a point at the beginning of the episode. I'm trying to set the stage. People don't want to hear that. They want action. So I understand. The Seminole. Oh, wait, I already got that. If you can clarify a little bit of what you mean, Mark Kavitsky, because I think that's kind of worded. It's hard to get what you mean from that, but I think I get what you mean. Jackson was a man who refused to be killed, talking about Andrew Jackson, or even for the most part dissuaded. And thank you, sir. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I'm glad to have you, Hansel. Jackson is an interesting guy. Whether you love him, whether you hate him, you can't say that he's not interesting. There are quite a few videos about the Dade Massacre in YouTube's. Yeah, they are. They're very short, though. The ones that I found. Going to be watching them after this stream ends. Yeah, I'm wanting to add to, add to that collection. But usually, a lot of the episodes I do, there will all already be a longer form video. I didn't find any terribly long ones on the Dade Massacre. Let me look again. Dade Massacre. I think I researched like several episodes at once. So sometimes I mix them up. Yeah, I guess there's one or two. I guess really only one that's over 10 minutes. I see the Grattan Massacre. But either way, I defer. There, I haven't found a lot, so hopefully this will be the biggest and best one ever done on the Dade Massacre. I'm confident that it will be. Did the Seminole live in long houses or were they more mobile? I believe they were like semi-itinerant. I don't know about long houses. To me, it's the way I understand it. It's more of a wiki-up situation or an elevated house. I'm a sucker for a tragic backstory, kind of like the witches who tried to get me into a furnace. Well, don't go into any furnace. Don't listen to any witches. We have a strong anti-witch sentiment here. Bam Indiana might argue that, but I'm talking like at least bad witches. Like a 4-pole. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Josh McAllister is describing the Seminole Lodge like a 4-pole shed with a thatch roof and a floor elevated off the ground, because we're generally living in territory that's very wet ground. Let's see. Good stream, says Wagon. Thank you very much. This was a fun one. Also, you know what? I'm going to move it. Let's do it tomorrow because we're already I need to finish up the pictures for this. The pictures, my gosh, they take the longest. Writing the script, no big deal. I mean, that's the most technical part, but finding the pictures for all this stuff is the toughest. That's taken me all day. I'm still not finished. Not complaining. It ain't digging ditches, but it's taken me a lot of time. So I got to get that finished, get that off to the editor. So I'm going to keep this one relatively short. We'll do another 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes here. I will check out the Fetterman episode. Yeah, I think you'll like it, Blake. I messed up the name. But Blake, man, I think you'll like it. You should look up the Battle of Wabash. Oh, I know the Battle of Wabash, but we haven't done an episode on it. Wabash. I'm going to write that down. Let's see. The Seminole lived in a chickie. Okay, the name for the home, the Seminole home, is a chickie. The 4-pole shed with a thatch roof and a floor elevated off the ground. Really, if you've seen, if you did the watch along for Apocalypto, similar houses to that, like thatched roof, relatively open slats in between, like so that it's easily aerated in the swamp conditions, and elevated floor, so it stays off the wet ground. Let's see. I think I am caught up. Oh, and that's what I was getting to. Tomorrow, we're going to do the live stream that I've been trying to get done. Well, first of all, movie night has not been forgotten. We'll do a movie night this weekend. We still need to do the right stuff. And I have the list of movie nights beyond that. So we're going to shoot for a Saturday movie night. But tomorrow night, I want to do the Dempsey Willard fight. The real, in a lot of ways, kind of the cap end to the Old West, a massive boxing fight that happened in 1919, really where Jack Dempsey was viewed as kind of the last image of the Wild West as the country kind of moved on from World War I and entered a new century. Dempsey was still seen as this like barroom brawling, cowboy train hopping symbol of what had been and what was still kind of hanging on. And this whole massive fight is arranged in 1919 in Toledo, Ohio. They sell 100,000 tickets. They build an absolute ramshackle ad hoc stadium made out of newly cut pine boards that leak sap everywhere. It's like pools of sap underneath the grandstands. And it is probably the most brutal fight that we have uh, on film from that era. It is the modern day rules of neutral corners and standing gate counts are not yet in effect. So we just see an abject massacre. Like you, even in the early days of UFC, you did not see just out and out brutality like this. The way that this fight unfolds, and we can show it. It's public domain now, and because it's black and white, you can't see the gore quite as obviously. But there's 7 knockdowns in the first round. There's a huge bet that Dempsey's manager has $10,000 in 1919. Dempsey's manager, who's a shady character himself, has bet that he will knock Willard out in the first round, and they try to get out of Dodge before the first round is over, and then the fight is called back. They think there is a knockout. Willard's been knocked out, and you can see at the end of the first round, he doesn't even know where he is. He's like looking up at the ref, going like, "Are you stopping the fight?" He's looking at his corner, like, "Okay, this is over, right?" And his corner's like, "No, you got to get back in there." And he's just like, "Oh God, like I can't go back in there." Willard is 6'6", a big giant farmer. Like he was supposed to be unbeatable, right? He is a giant. Dempsey is listed as 6 foot, maybe 6'1". Obviously, it would depend on what gas station he was walking out of, because maybe 6 foot, but you can see him standing next to Willard. It's not even close. Willard's just way up here. Dempsey might be 180, 185. So he's not a small guy, but he's really small standing next to Jess Willard. And there's much different weight classes. Like today, you wouldn't really see someone 180, 185 pounds fighting a guy who's 260 and 6'6". But back in the day, they don't care, Jack. They just want to see a cool fight, you know? So 100,000 people pack into this fire hazard of a stadium. There's one way in, one way out. It's amazing that the fire marshal didn't shut the place down, but he's probably paid off. All the concessions, like it's a blazing hot day, and all the lemonade that they've made has been ruined because this drunk guy fell into it the night before, so they can't use it. Nobody knows what lemonade is clean, so it's just logistically an abject disaster. The fight itself is unbelievably brutal and kind of a showcase in and of itself of an old west barroom brawl. Like Dempsey just beats the tar out of this guy, and today it would be stopped well inside the first round. You do not there's a 3 knockdown rule today. Like if you get knocked down 3 times in one round, the fight is over. Willard was knocked down 7 times in the first round. It's unbelievable. And Dempsey just keeps positioning himself behind Willard so that as soon as he stands up, he's already punching him in the ribs. He breaks some ribs. He breaks Willard's jaw, breaks his nose. You see blood just pouring all over his chest. It's black and white, and you could still see like how terrible this is. And it just rocketed Dempsey to a stardom that no one in American pop culture had seen before. We think of, certainly Babe Ruth. There's Bill Tilden, just a couple celebrities of the time. Like as Babe Ruth certainly is like the biggest athlete of the time. He was not even close to Dempsey's level. Dempsey was so huge like that. This made him the first universally known sports celebrity in American history, where like everyone knew Jack Dempsey. All the women wanted to be with him. All the men wanted to be him. He was that dude for a long time. And like, I think it's kind of the cap end to Old West history, thus worth us taking a look at it, and a major turning point in American culture. So it behooves us to take a look at it, and it's awesome. You guys are gonna love it. Like if you like boxing or fighting at all, we'll be able to watch this. It is crazy. It's nuts. Just to watch it today, it seems like complete and utter violent pandemonium, and that's what it was. But you get to see kind of the evolution of boxing too. Like by today's standards, this is pretty there's a lot. It's far less technical, we could say that, but you'll get to see the evolution of the sport, the evolution of major events in America, and just how much more genteel society has become since the death throes of the Old West. And in many ways, my contention is that in much of America, the Old West is still alive and well. You can go to any rodeo and see that. You can go to any county that's far away from your major urban centers, and I think you will still see the Old West alive and well in many respects there. But I'm excited for you guys to see this. I think we have a lot of fight fans and a lot of sports fans in the chat. Even if you are not, I think you will enjoy the history behind it. It is an amazing story. It just has twists and turns, and everything goes wrong. People get screwed out of money. Like I said, the concessions are just a disaster. People aren't even allowed to smoke in the stadium because everyone's like one drop cigarette, and this thing is all going up in flames. It's a miracle that the place didn't burn down. So yeah, it's just a fascinating story. I've been really getting into a lot of these old boxing biographies as I research and write these history episodes. So I thought, you know what, I got to share this with you guys. So I'm excited for that, and we'll be able to watch it. I'm gonna have the screen here, and we'll break it down, piece by piece. Let's see. Am I missing anything? And so that'll be tomorrow. Movie night will be this weekend. I'll have a side story out Friday. We'll have a Friday side story, maybe Saturday. Another compilation, the Dade Massacre episode. Just boom, boom, boom. Lots of stuff in the pipeline. So lots of stuff coming at you. Wild how Protestantism grew up in this country in opposition to the Catholic Spanish Empire, watching the beef play out in the colonial era. Yeah, it was a big deal. Like people just, today we say, oh, my buddy, he goes to the Protestant church down the street, and I go here to, St. Francis in the Catholic church. That was a huge deal back in the day. And, centuries before that, there was wars fought over the Protestant treatment of the Eucharist, over very what we would view as minute details today. So yes, Protestants versus Catholics was a major part. It played a giant part in the formation, especially of kind of proto-America before the Constitution was signed, and as it was major European powers vying for the entire continent. Let's see. Space Cowboy says, gross? What do you mean? The Spanish supported the Creek Indians against the Seminoles by arming the Creek against them and against the Americans. Yes, so the Spanish, it's nothing new today. Like arming proxy forces is nothing new. So the Spanish essentially used the Creek as a proxy force, not only against the Seminole in the territory, but against American incursion into Florida. Thank you for that. That's from Mark Kavitsky. The Catholics were barred from owning guns because of the Spanish raids along the southern coast of the U.S. Yeah, it's essentially a Protestant country. There was a strong anti-Catholic sentiment in its early iteration. Who wins in a fight, says Space Cowboy? Tyson in his prime or Dempsey in his? Well, I think Tyson was a far more, we'd seen the evolution of the sport by then. So Tyson was a far more technically developed fighter, but without Dempsey, there would be no Tyson. Tyson was an obsessive film watcher. He watched films of Dempsey incessantly. So he imitated kind of the spirit of Dempsey's style, and Tyson's style, the peekaboo style, is a little bit of an evolution of that. Highly aggressive, get inside your opponent's range, make him pay, and then get out with getting hit. So a lot of Tyson's style evolved from Dempsey, but I think Tyson beats him. But interesting point, Tyson says this himself. Dempsey's like high fade, which I'm gonna go get that cut next, guys, because we got to do something with this here. But Dempsey's like fade, like short on the sides, longer on the top, was inspired Tyson's fade. It inspired his famous haircut. Tyson in the 80s was like, his haircut was part of the brand. So that inspired Tyson in many ways. Dempsey was, to me, in a lot of ways, a proto Tyson. Let's see. Can you imagine being Adolf Metzger, having to fight for your life with a stupid bugle? Yeah, I mean, that's a bad dude. I would like to do a short on him as well. Adolf Metzger in the, is that Wabash? No. Can you tell me which battle that is, Theo Wise? But Adolf Metzger was the bugler for his company and the lone survivor against, I believe, the Lakota and Cheyenne. And he fought them off with his bugle. Like, he fought to the very last, like beating the warriors attacking him with his bugle. They found him later. They found his body and they found his bugle. It's all dented up. It's on display now, I believe. I forget what museum has it on display, but you can see pictures of it. It's creepy. It's wild because that thing is all dented up. It is barely it's a bugle. You know, it's a bugle, but like, it is dented to hell. And you know how hard a bugle is. Every dent in that is from hitting a Lakota or Cheyenne warrior with it. So it's brutal stuff. He is that's a bad dude. Adolf Metzger was a bad dude. The Old West is alive and well in Virginia City, Nevada. Yeah, absolutely it is. And it's alive and well, I think, through vast swaths of this country. Who wins in a fight, the Protestants in their prime or the Catholics in their prime? I'm Orthodox, man, so I got to say the Orthodox, man. Gross. Someone fell into the lemonade the night before the fight. Oh, yeah. This notorious drunk who was notorious for never taking a bath either. He was like widely known as Stinky McStinkerson. And this dude gets hammered and falls into the lemonade, almost drowns. And I think there's half a dozen or a dozen tubs. Like, think of like livestock watering tubs. They have a bunch of those out, and this guy falls into one of them, and they don't know which one it was. The day after, there's question as to which one it was. So nobody wants to buy the lemonade. These guys are thousands of, yet it's just like today where vendors had to pay to be in the stadium. And now they've paid all this money to sell the lemonade, and they're out all of that money. Like, no one's buying the lemonade. So it was a wild day. The fighting is different because Dempsey was bare knuckle compared to glove. Dempsey was not bare knuckle. Really, John L. Sullivan was the catalyst for bringing the gloved era about. There's a great book. I believe I'm reading right now in conjunction with this Dempsey book, but it talks a lot about Sullivan's insistence on moving to gloved fighting as compared to bare knuckle, which was predominant before him. This is called Strong Boy, John L. Sullivan, by Christopher Klein. Highly recommend it. Strong Boy by Christopher Klein. So Dempsey and Willard were wearing gloves, but I believe much smaller than today. I believe UFC gloves are 4 ounces. I believe these were 6 ounces. They were, I think that's right. Maybe they were 4 ounces. But yes, smaller gloves than today. Metzger was at the Fetterman fight. Thank you. Buglers didn't carry weapons. Yeah, it's just to make that clear, Metzger had no option. Like, he only had his bugle, and he fought till the bitter end. Let's see. Am I leaving anything else out? Jake Skywalker says the Catholics would win. A proud papist. Respect to that. I mean, like, okay, if we're just going the Catholics versus the Protestants, yeah, man, the Catholics win. We're a much bigger fighting force. Let's see. But I'm not trying to step on any toes there, okay? I'm just that's my answer, but I have most of my family and most of my friends are Protestant, and I love them dearly. I've heard this story about Metzger's bugle. Yeah, it's a great story. It's in the Fetterman Massacre episode. I just, like Keith Richards says about his songs, just because I wrote them doesn't mean I know them. It's like, yeah, I feel you there. Okay, so what are we at here? Okay, I'm gonna get out of here and go finish up these pictures. So y'all pray for me, because there's not a lot of Seminole pictures. So this one it's a slog, but we're gonna finish it up. I'll have this out at least. This should be done by Friday, and we'll have the episode out for members by Sunday, and everybody else by Monday. In between, like I said, side story coming out.
hopefully we'll have a compilation out in the interim as well. A couple live streams, shorts every day, 2 or 3 shorts. So lots of content. Want to keep everybody. I know my favorite channels, the more content they put out, the more I watch because I just like what they do. So I want to give you lots of content, get you through your work week, get you through your work day, get you through all the stuff you got to do. So thank you for everybody that's listening, watching. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It is, I love coming in and hanging out with you guys. I love doing the episodes. I think it's all, these stories are just fascinating and a lot of fun to tell. I'm glad everybody comes and hangs out. And yeah, so we'll do the boxing stream tomorrow and go finish this episode up, and we'll keep it coming for you guys. Thank you again. Good to see everybody this evening. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. And until then, y'all take care. Have a good night and God bless. We'll see you.